Hello and welcome to another episode of the Breathing Body podcast. My name is Florina, I'm your host, and it's so wonderful that you are here today. And I hope that this episode reaches you well and in a good health and spirit, and that you are enjoying the summer as much as I do. This podcast invites you, dear listeners, to meet your body in a deeper and more meaningful way and to find your way back home. We explore tools and practices, share stories and experiences about how we can say yes to the body we inhabit. That's the most beautiful project life has to offer, and I call it self-love. I'm talking to people from various fields of research and practice, such as osteopathy, dance, somatic practices, psychology, spirituality, and many more. In this episode, I'm talking to the wonderful Meg McCabe. Meg is a podcaster and a mental health professional based in West Hartford in Connecticut. She owns a private eating disorder recovery coaching practice, and she is the founder of the Recovery Collective, a global eating disorder recovery community focused on healing through connection. She's also the host of her own podcast called the Full and Thriving Podcast, which is a mental health and personal development podcast. She is, as you will see, a passionate educator, wonderful speaker, group facilitator, retreat host, and mental health advocate. And it's been wonderful with her. And yes, Meg is a woman like myself who dealt with an eating disorder for many years before she found healing with her own body and embarked on that wonderful path she is on today. In this conversation, you will learn about Meg's journey of being a fashion model, recovering from an eating disorder, and how she became a successful coach supporting other women to recover too. We talked about how recovery really requires action and a certain amount of boldness rather than just intellectualizing our feelings and emotions. We talked about how to deal with bodily changes during pregnancy as a woman who has dealt with an eating disorder, and daily routines for rest and self-care, and so much more. We had such a good time recording and are both excited to share this conversation with you, with the one and only hope that it may spark inspiration in you to say yes to the body you inhabit and take the bold decision to over and over again recover into love. And if you do and did enjoy these episodes, then please leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, share it on social media with all your friends and family. You can't imagine how much every of these tiny actions is a huge support for me and this project. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I send you lots of love. Welcome, and also welcome back, Meg. Second attempt. So good to have you.
Hello, Florina. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here on your show today. I can't wait to be back. Second attempt and talk to you everything about recovery.
Yeah, we were just saying how I think the beautiful thing is that because we had such a lovely start and then some technical issues, it literally wasn't recorded, but it was so good that I was even more looking forward to again talk to you, Meg, from woman to woman, from recovered woman to recovered woman, and also from podcast host to podcast host.
I know. How great is that? We have so much in common. This is going to go so well. I can't wait.
Yeah. And I remember very well how we started the last conversation. And I thought, I'm going to start with that question again. Because
Okay.
like for you, like for me, also your life has, I guess, never been not really about the body. It has been a lot about the body. And I would like to dive right in and ask you, what does your body mean to you today?
Wow. That is such a good question. For me, I think over the years, as I've gone through eating disorder recovery and have healed my relationship with my body, now my body means that it is I really do see it as the vehicle that helps me travel through life, right? It is the capsule that contains my soul in a way. And it's something I really have learned, like keyword learned, to honor and respect and listen to. So I do see my body as a friend and someone who's a teammate that I'm working through life with. So it's so much easier for me to respect my body when I view it in this way.
Wow, you said so many. I got goosebumps. I loved when you said a capsule which contains my soul, because that really, our body is so much more than the physical matter, right?
Absolutely. I mean, our soul is the thing that gives us life. Really, like once the soul leaves the body, essentially you've passed away, right? So I think the soul is what makes me me. It's what makes you you. And then the body is again, like that capsule that helps us through this journey of life.
Absolutely. And I also loved how you said the word honor, because I find that very often, we learn to respect and to listen, but actually to honor, and honoring, then I feel celebrate that miraculous vehicle.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to honoring our bodies, like it's a respect thing, right? It's a self-kindness thing, and it's a listening thing. I honor my body by resting, right? And nourishing, letting it meeting its needs without denying it. Like the way I used to.
What are your daily routines or rituals to rest and nurture and self-soothe?
Yes. Well, it's so interesting because I think one thing that I've been trying to make a point of is, first of all, getting out of the house regularly to be outside, right? So for me, honoring my body is like getting the sunshine, being outside, moving my body, whether that's through exercise or through just a nice walk outside. That's one thing that I love to do. The outdoors, like that's how I love to honor my body. And then feeding myself regularly, adequately enough, enjoying food, embracing food. I'm not a totally structured, routine person. So again, like what I'm doing for my body changes and evolves every single day. Right now, I am pregnant, which is so cool. It's the first time I've ever expected a baby. So this whole journey has been about honoring your body in different ways, right? So I'm getting more tired more easily. I end up wanting to rest after 4 p.m. I'm pretty much wanting to rest and relax. And I'm trying not to judge myself for needing more food, more rest, like all the things that you work on in recovery. It's almost like in pregnancy, it's heightened and you're working and you know what I mean?
I love that you say that, Meg, because the latest at the last episode I was recording for my podcast was called it's called Eating Disorder Recovery Tools A to Z, and I made it in 2 parts. And I made such a point that all these recovery tools serve us way beyond recovery, right? Which also I encouraged everyone. Sometimes I feel people are, no, this is just for people with eating disorder recovery. Yes, but what we gain from it is is the life tools which we all need. And we just chose the eating disorder to get to those. So it's so wonderful how all what you learned, it's actually really serving you now that you are pregnant, right?
Yes, it is. It's totally a new version of putting my recovery tools to work, which is a exciting thing because I've been recovered for a long time and I've seen the gifts of my recovery evolve with me through various situations in life. And again, this is a situation where the gifts of recovery are coming back to help me and bring me through a new stage. And I think the first one that I've noticed is the food freedom and really embracing that, like just knowing that my body's going to be hungrier, that it's going to be needing more nourishment, and not judging myself for that, right? And not trying to control what that looks like. There are so many toxic pregnancy accounts that are like, don't gain too much weight, don't do this. And I know to ignore those things, right? I have that resilience that I've built up over the years, and then
Yes.
again, the rest, the gift of rest and not judging myself for needing more rest, which has, it was actually a weird situation because I embrace rest. I love sleep. I talk to my clients about rest all the time. And then when I was first noticing my body get super tired, I did fall into that place of judgment and internal conflict for a short period of time where I was like, I should be working. I should be doing more around the house. I was putting myself in that pressure zone for the first time in a while. So I had to almost self-coach myself through that.
Wow. Again, you said so many wonderful things. What I loved, Meg, was how you said you gained the resilience and trust in your body, which that is, I haven't yet been pregnant, but I work with a lot of pregnant women because I'm a pediatric osteopath as well. And that's exactly what we need, resilience and trust in our body, because there are so many opinions, right? The midwife says this and your friend says that. But then you and baby and your intuitive trust in your body, that's where the answer lies. And yes, that is what I guess what we both gained through the eating disorder recovery journey, and how you can almost, I see now how your pregnancy can blossom and, grow from that ground of actually, I know that body and I know what she needs.
Yes. And you know what recovery also teaches you about trusting your intuition and tuning out the outside noise of all of these opinions that people have. Everyone's trying to tell the pregnant lady how to eat, what to do, how to have the best outcomes. And I have been way less anxious about those tips than I see like my other fellow pregnant peers be, because I lean on my body as the authority in these situations where I think some people, because they haven't gone through recovery or had such an intense like body healing journey, they might not be so attuned to their intuition and their body's needs.
Yes, absolutely. Learn to trust intuition. And that is our decision, right? Who is my authority? That's such a nice statement you made, to lean onto my body as my authority. That is
absolutely.
so powerful. I do want to go back to the very, very beginning at one point, but let's stay here for a moment. So I'm so curious, Meg, you went through an eating disorder, and I assume, like me, you had many years of that horrible feeling of anything feeling tight, anything getting bigger, or just that fear of looking to the mirror and see body mass. And here we are, pregnant, and one thing, your body will get bigger and bigger and bigger for the next 9 months. And how is that as a recovered woman? How do you deal with that?
It's bringing up so many interesting components I haven't had to think about in a while. So first of all, overall, totally enjoying it. I'm rolling with it. I enjoy the changes. I feel like I've been embracing it. I feel overall really well. But I will say that when, like, now that the bump is a little bit more obvious, I feel a little bit exposed. I feel more um, self-conscious of the eyes on me, and everyone's watching my body change. And I relate that to recovery, because when you go through recovery, your body's changing and you feel like everyone's eyes are on you. So for me, I've been noticing that old version of myself that feels the way people are seeing my body change, right? That like very sensitive inner soul, that part of me that was always sensitive about like my place in the world and being seen. I feel that this is like a little bit of being exposed. Like, you're out there, you're labeled, you're a pregnant woman, like people see it. And I'm not so self-conscious about the size, but I'm self-conscious about people and making that statement and being seen.
Yes.
That's been where I've been
Yes.
just noticing. It hasn't been distressing. It hasn't been this thing that keeps me inside or anything like that. I'm truly embracing it. But as the body changes, I'm more aware of my feelings of that being seen element.
Yeah, it's interesting because, right, we were talking about feeling and intuition. And I mean, if you get pregnant, then even if you're super in tune with your intuition feeling, yet that just the visual side of you is very, very obvious. And you
Yes,
also,
and
you
people love to
see as
comment.
much as you feel.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to, again, where I work in a field where it's just not okay to comment on people's bodies and the changes. And so I live by that mentality. And then I see people constantly commenting on every change in my body now in a totally different way. So in my head, I'm a little like annoyed, because it's like, why do you suddenly feel like you can comment every time you notice a change? Right. So
Yeah.
it
That
goes
is
against
so
my
interesting.
yes, it goes against my values that I've worked really hard to like live with, which are like, we don't comment on people's bodies, and we it's not our business to point out changes. And yeah.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I guess both our antennae are so on alert for these kind of comments. And exactly, we see a pregnant woman and maybe we first say, oh, you look great, or oh, bump got bigger, rather than asking, how do you feel? How are you? What's alive in you? Yeah.
Yeah. I do find people are asking me how I feel a lot more, which is awesome. I kind of like that. People do care about that.
Nice.
But it's still one of those, I think the whole liberty people have to just like assert themselves on their opinion on like how high you're carrying, how low you're carrying, how big your bump is. It's this new version of body commentary I've never experienced before.
And you mentioned, I would like to dive a little bit into, you said before with the pregnancy, some of these judgments came up again, and how you would self-coach yourself. And how do you do that when some of those old voices come up? How do you self-coach, Meg?
I think it comes down to for me, it's as simple as inner voice. Like, I'm strong enough in my beliefs and my recovery where there's nothing more than just that mindfulness piece of noticing the inner voice and what it's saying. And then either just putting that back in check. Right. I haven't had any real distress around the changes or self-criticism around the changes. But if anything were to feel uncomfortable, I do feel like I just lean on that inner voice, right? To counteract like any criticism or judgment that might come into play.
And again, here is the beauty of how through recovery we gain that inner coach, that best friend, right? I always thought it's so wonderful. I worked with so many coaches and suddenly I was my own coach, and you never lose that coach. And then things happen, pregnancy, grief, whatever. And actually, wow, through these challenging years, you develop this incredible skill, which, not everyone develops in one's life. The skill to listen.
I think that's a major gift in recovery, is that skill to listen, and also to recognize that no matter what happens in life, it's very natural for your body to change throughout the phases of life. Just aging is a reason why your body will change, or lifestyle changes. So for me, this is just another season of body change. It's not like I recovered and my body stayed the same for the next decade. I've had ebbs and flows of different versions of this body, and I will continue. And I think that's a realistic standard we should all have for ourselves, which is, as we grow as humans and evolve, and as our life evolves, our bodies are going to go through chapters, right?
Absolutely.
And we can't hold on to this control of, this is how my body needs to look forever. This is how much my body needs to weigh forever. It's so unnatural. You have to move with the flow and the evolution of your body over time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, I always knew from my training, etc., that the body is a process and you can't control, but I didn't really get it until I recovered myself and I realized, wow, yes, you can't control a process, and the body is you said flow, absolutely. You can just give it space. You can just support it and give it space. And especially for us women with the menstrual cycle, for me, menstrual cycle awareness, that was such a tool in the later stage of recovery, and still is. And it's just it's so wonderful, because yes, we are different and our chemistry is different day by day. So let go of control. It's not possible.
Yeah, I think it's important to not judge the changes, to just observe them, and continue to honor and respect your body, right? And if there's a change that feels scary to you, I think there's work to be done, right? It just shows that there's some work to be done there, and we don't want to judge ourselves for having that reaction. Like, we do live in a world where there is weight stigma and fat phobia, and so much unfair treatment when bodies are larger than, quote, acceptable in the world, or whatever. And I think if you have a fearful reaction to a body change, you do want to be compassionate first, right? And not be too hard on yourself. Recognize this is a product of living in the world that we live in.
Absolutely. And on that breath, Meg, take us back how many years it needs. Because I know that what we now talk, there were moments in your life that wasn't that easy. And I think what I'm particularly interested is, if you take us back a few years, what were these key moments or these game changers which allowed you to enter that landscape when we now journey through? Take us back to that time.
So what I'm hearing is you're looking for kind of pivotal moments of my recovery. Yeah. So, I think I can tell you about the time where I heard my healthy self voice for the first time. Right. So I think when we're in recovery, or when we have an eating disorder, we haven't even started recovery yet. You are just being controlled by the eating disorder voice. And that is your inner voice in that stage of life. Like, there is no healthy self chiming in. There is no internal battle that you're aware of. It's more, I hear my eating disorder and I respond appropriately to what it wants me to do. And you're just living in that mode. And so when I was younger and in my eating disorder, I did modeling. I was living in New York City. I was walking in Fashion Week. And I just was so obsessed with weight loss, calorie counting. I was using pretty intense behaviors quite frequently. Like, it was not a good situation. And I remember it was during Fashion Week. I had such an interesting experience of highs and lows in just one day. I had booked a really important fashion show. People were really celebrating me for being in this show. I walked alongside some really famous models of the time. So people in fashion will recognize these names, like Chanel Iman was there. Lily Donaldson was there. Man, I think of Erin Wasson was there. There were these huge names, and I was like the only new face in the show. And I had this high, right? I'm like, oh my God, I made it. This is amazing. And then that night, I hit a huge low. I was using behaviors. I was punishing myself and crying in the bathroom, essentially, like sobbing. Like, I go from this high to this low. And I was in so much emotional distress. I don't know if it was the stress of that moment or feeling not good enough or feeling, I think it was, even though I had been in that show, I still didn't feel like I was good enough, right? I didn't feel like I had really achieved what I wanted to achieve. And I felt the momentum already dying. And so after using all of these intense behaviors, I hear this voice and it says, "You can leave now." And I was like, huh? What's that? I think about this all day, every day. What do you mean leave? Like, I just got here. I just started this career. What do you mean leave? And it was basically saying, like, this is not sustainable for you. This is not healthy for you. What are you doing? Like, it was a strong inner voice. I grew up religious, so I felt like it was God when I first heard that voice, but I now know it could have been interpreted as my healthy self in recovery, right? Or just my intuition. It was just so loud. It was like, you can leave. Don't stay in this situation. What are you doing to yourself? And I've heard this fact. I think people think like 80,000 thoughts a day. I'm going to get that number wrong, everyone. It's several thousand thoughts a day. And I had never been offered that thought before, right? Most of my thoughts were the same repetitive eating disorder thoughts. And this healthy self thought says, you don't have to do this. You can leave. And I held on to that thought. It was like I caught a butterfly in the sky. I was like, wait, I want this one. Let me think about this thought. And I really contemplated, like, why am I here? What am I doing? Because modeling was so tied to the eating disorder. Like, that's the thing. Like, I had my eating disorder because of modeling. They were intertwined, just like how a ballerina or an actress or an athlete has an eating disorder because it's tied to a dream, right? So for me, it was completely enmeshed. So it was like, you can leave, you should quit this, focus on your health, focus on like getting back to happiness. And so that next morning, I went to my agency. I told them the distress I was under, and I essentially just quit and moved out the next day, right? I just unpacked all of my bags, moved home, quit. I told the agency I'd be back. I never went back. And that was the end of it. But that was the first time I heard my healthy self. And then that is when I officially started recovery, was that spark, that moment of changing my environment and aligning with my true values, which were peace, I think, inner peace.
Wow. It was wonderful how you said how suddenly, your healthy self, God, universe, different people who call different things, offered you a new thought. That's such a nice way of putting it, and right, isn't it? I mean, certain challenges or conflicts have to get so loud and until sometimes we need to suffer long enough that you're able to listen to that new thought which is offered to us.
Mm-hmm. I actually really respect my younger self a lot because I felt so much clarity in that moment, where I don't think it's easy to always have clarity, right? For some reason, my younger self really trusted.
Do you mean with the younger self, the eating disorder self, or what do you mean with the younger self?
The younger self that heard that thought and decided to take action on it, right? I really respect her. I always look back and admire her for so strongly knowing the right thing to do for her real health. Where I think as we get older, the more we have our eating disorders, the more confusion sets in and the more back and forth internally comes through, right? So I always really respect the fact that I was bold enough to see it clearly and not convince myself to stay or continue on. I could tell there were so many red flags in my eating disorder that I could not ignore anymore. Like I actually made a list of all of the red flags. That was another pivotal moment when I sat down and really looked at, what is this doing to my body? What is this doing to my mind? And clearly use that to be decisive about choosing recovery.
Wow.
And I see this be a hard thing to do for so many of my clients is you have the facts blaring loudly into your ears, right? Or in your face. This is not good for me. And then there's still that confusion and that internal back and forth.
Wow.
And for some reason, again, my younger self was able to see that and be like, okay, like the writing is on the wall. It's time to do something different.
How old were you at that point? That Fashion Week light bulb moment? Now I'm very curious.
I was probably 19. Wow. I had my eating disorder younger. Like I think I'd say it started around 15, 16.
Yeah, Meg, that actually is something I feel for you to celebrate over and over and over again. How that tells so much about just that vitality, that health, that drive in you. That 19-year-old girl made this clear, and I love that you said bold. It was also a bold decision. That's how it felt for me. At one point, I could find as many reasons to go on as red flags to stop, but it just required, and that can be so triggering if you're in a different point.
Yeah.
But I had to decide, and I just stick with it because I trust that spark of light. And it needed so much courage and boldness. Like,
really choosing recovery and going in, jumping in fully is extremely bold. And if you can fully align with choosing recovery, you're going to get there a lot sooner than if you have one foot in, 1 foot out. Because the woman who sees a dietitian who's fully in recovery is going to commit as best as she can to the meal plan.
Say that again. Right? The woman who...
Like if you are sick, you have an eating disorder, but you have fully aligned and committed to recovery, like you have worked through your resistance, I find those people are more likely to follow the meal plan and do the coaching assignments and make those baby steps every single day, where there are also humans in recovery, which I have so much compassion for, are more conflicted. And this is where the tug of war and the internal conflict can really keep you in a stuck place. Like, my dietitian suggests I do this, but maybe I can sneak some eating disorder in here or hold on to this little component a little bit longer. That is the more traditional eating disorder recovery journey, I think, is that strong internal conflict.
Absolutely. And I feel at that point, right? The boldness just really requires that sitting down and really reflecting upon, and what is the story I tell myself? You know, I remember one is telling all these 1,000 million different stories to different people, and some lies and some truth. And I remember that moment when I suddenly said, okay, and what is the story? What is actually the story I tell myself? I want to tell myself, and can I commit to tell myself that story?
I'm so intrigued. What was the story? Do you remember like what story you aligned with?
I think it had a lot for me to do with what you said before, and that's why I made a note here. I want to talk more about that, right? That fear of not being good enough. And can I actually just boldly change that story and tell myself, even if it makes me, in the beginning, it made me kind of almost angry to look into the mirror and tell myself, and I am good enough no matter what. But that was the big story I had to rewrite and then just commit. So actually, let's go in there, Meg, because you mentioned, I thought that is so interesting. You walked on that catwalk, that fashion week, and in the evening hotel, wherever, from very high, you just fell down to very low. You mentioned emotional distress, and it sounded like there was a fear around. I did all of that, and yet you could have told myself, I'm not good enough, right? How, what is my question? I'm just curious with, maybe in recovery, how did you deal with fears or with that big fear, which we all know so well? I'm not good enough. And if I would like that and that, I would, but then still I'm not good enough. How to break that vicious cycle?
Yeah, when I was going through that moment, I don't think it was conscious that was a running like line in my thoughts. But when I look back at that moment of like achieving what I had set out to do, this being among the greats in this fashion show and being picked and being chosen to be there, and like like I had gotten there, like looking back at that, I'm like, oh my God, like that was a great moment. It was amazing. But I did not give myself the credit for it. I did not think I looked good enough. I don't think my body was thin enough. I don't think my skin was clear enough. Like there were so many inner criticisms going on, even though I had already been qualified to be there, right? Like someone hired me to be there, and I still felt like a failure after it, which is so interesting. And the only underlying thing I could think of was I must not have felt good enough. Like I was constantly comparing myself to everyone there. And why didn't I book the other show? Like there's better shows I could have booked. And even though I had this really amazing moment, there was this inner critic just knocking me down. And so that stream of like I guess that unconscious thought is I'm not good enough, and this wasn't good enough, and I didn't do good enough, and I need to be more. I need to keep proving myself. And that I think that is where that came from. And then of course, to cope with all of that, I used my eating disorder that night.
Feeling that huge in that moment, void or emptiness of something wants to just be, I mean, in the end, it's what are we seeking with these behaviors? We want to say yes to the wholeness we are. And in the end, to break it down, you said peace, inner peace, love, right? Can I love myself just for here in that hotel room, sitting here and actually feeling the way I feel without even labeling the feelings? That's the other game changer. to just feel.
And I think when it comes to the feeling like I'm enough, I will say, because all of this was so deeply rooted in my consciousness, I wasn't staring at myself in the mirror saying, I'm enough. I am enough. I wasn't trying to convince myself that I am enough. I wasn't even aware of all of this going on in my head. But I think there was a part of me that knew actions align with enoughness.
Yes.
Right. So that's where I acted as if I was enough. I acted in a way to show myself that I'm enough, which was leaving and quitting and focusing on school and family and getting better, right? So my action, I think that's one thing we need to think about in the recovery world more is we can intellectualize feeling like enough. We can try to convince ourselves that we're enough. We can do all of this belief work, but at the end of the day, the actions are how you actually show yourself you're enough and
Absolutely.
start to believe that it's true.
Yeah, and also I remember also sometimes actually writing down all the things which I had done and which I do, which one does so amazingly day by day, writing all those little achievements, which is, wow, I actually get up and I move or whatever it is, tiny things, to black and white.
I love that.
Yeah, to write it all down.
That's a really good method to just boost your self-concept too. Like if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not enough, I'm not doing good enough, I'm not progressing in recovery, really getting in there and writing down those small wins that are actually big wins, right? Like something small, a small action in recovery can be a really big win, and not judging yourself for that, really just sitting there and celebrating what you've done for yourself and how you've shown up for yourself.
Absolutely. And there I would add to honor all these baby steps, right? That's the other so wonderful thing we learn in recovery. No recovery is woof, just linear. It's our life is cyclical every month, the whole life. And so is cyclical, not cyclical, but yeah, we take baby steps. We take 2 steps forward, a step back, but it doesn't mean that we are not progressing in inverted commas or recovering, and just honor these, because sometimes we don't know how a little step then actually to that and to this and to that. That's the one thing I still so much apply. Sometimes I wake up and I don't know how to get this person onto the show, and I think, okay, what is just the first tiny baby steps I can take to do that? And action, and then action, do that.
And it's funny because that in itself is another way to show yourself you're enough, right? By doing those baby actions, like recognizing that it's okay, it's a baby action, but that baby action is enough for that day or for that moment. And recognizing that we don't need to be making these drastic, life-changing moves every day, but if we're slowly and consistently honoring ourselves, showing up for ourselves, that is enough to get you there.
Yes.
And I want to be very clear to everyone listening. Yes, at 19, I had that moment of clarity and chose recovery, but my recovery was definitely not linear. It was the internal conflict did set in, right? I had that clarity from the start to begin the journey. But then when it came to the internal conflict of like day-to-day action, that was a very up and down process that took years.
Yes. And I can only sign that because, right, we nurtured that eating disorder self literally for so many years, like a child had to grow. So it's just nature. If something is going to grow, it takes time to nurture, to give that to that. I'm now talking about the healthy self. That just needs years and times to make that stronger and like your baby in your belly. It's not going to grow in 2 weeks, right? And it was just when we talked about action fear, it made me, I remember at one point I listened to, do you know Lisa Nichols, that amazing motivational speaker? And at one point
I have not heard of her yet. I don't think. I'm not sure. I'll look her up.
She's wonderful. I mean, she's written amazing bestsellers. And I remember at one point, it was a silly little, no, it wasn't silly, but it was a teeny tiny YouTube webinar or something. And she said, and it helped me so much, she said that action is the antidote of fear. And that fear is just information. Fear is not a bad thing per se. If I feel afraid of not being good enough, it's just information. There is another layer, something which needs looking at, maybe expressing, talking about with therapist. And that helped me so much. And she used that metaphor. If the fear is like a mountain, you can say to the mountain, either you get smaller or I start climbing. And that helped me so much.
I love that. That's such a cool way to think about fear.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, the antidote to fear is action. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up in recovery is they're processing their fear. They're talking about their fear. They're reading books about recovery. They're watching all the YouTube videos, the Instagram posts. They're consuming the podcasts, and there's no action. Right?
Exactly.
You're not really actively recovering until you start challenging the food and you start challenging the behaviors and making changes towards the things you're afraid of. We can't think our way out of recovery. You have to do your way out of recovery.
Yes, that is so important that you remind us all we can't think ourselves through recovery. We have to actually do it. And this is the hard one. It's so challenging to read all these things and even just do the assignments in your head. I remember I would just do certain. I think, oh, I've done it. No, I've actually haven't done it.
You're right. You can, like, thinking back to the mountain, it's like you can look at the mountain, take pictures of the mountain, stare at the mountain, look at trail maps on the mountain. You can study the foliage and the animal life on the mountain. You can know everything about that mountain, but you really don't know it until you start hiking up the mountain.
Yes. And then I want to add, for everyone who feels, I mean, it needs courage. Yes, to then start climbing. And before you start climbing, you don't know what other people, what flowers, what views, what you will discover whilst you climb the mountain. That's the beautiful thing, or not. I had no clue that recovery would, for example, bring me to this podcast and talking to you today, right?
Yes, exactly. You don't know. I think when we think about our fears, it's not typically as bad as we think it's going to be. Right? So you're in your head making this hike, the scariest, most daunting, terrifying hike with all of these dangers. And then when you actually start the hike, you're like, wow, like there's so many beautiful flowers and the views are amazing and my body feels stronger. And, it's like, it's not as bad as your brain thinks. When we have an eating disorder, we like to catastrophize. We like to, think in black and white terms. We like to just make like anxiety. It's anxiety. Anxiety is fear-based thinking, usually about the future. And all I have to say is what you're afraid of is probably not that scary when you're actually in the moment doing the thing.
Absolutely. And yet in that very moment, it feels like, because you identified so much with that part, right? It feels like, whoa, who am I going to be without that? It felt to me like a momentarily loss of identity. And that brings me to the maybe last theme I'd like to explore or hear from you, Meg. So we go back to that moment, Fashion Week, and you had that wonderful light bulb moment, which, it's so powerful that it can be like a light bulb moment. And then you took that decision. And it was on one level, the recovery then only just started, but it was the end of something. And here you are host of your own podcast, Full and Thriving, and you created way more than that. And tell us about that. What's the life you recovered into, and what is filling your life? Yeah.
Oh, well, it's really exciting. Oh my gosh, this could be another hour. But what you recover into is always a surprise, right? It's kind of fun. It's like,
love it.
You have an idea, but you never know. And so I think one thing I embraced after, like, once I started recovery was relationships. So I recovered into fuller, deeper relationships. I fell in love for the first time. I don't know if anybody listening here has fallen in love before, but that is a wild, amazing, beautiful ride. And so for me, I was like, whoa, what an exchange. what a trade-off. You mean I get to stop obsessing over food, and once I stop doing that, I fall in love? Like, hell yeah, that was worth it in itself. It was like this reward. I felt like God had rewarded me for taking a leap of faith and letting go of the thing that I had a chokehold on, right? I had to surrender that need for thinness and the modeling dream. And I was surprised with something that was one of the happiest times of my life, right? And that, along with fullness in friendships, fullness in school, and I just entered this phase of my life where I was like more confident socially and coming alive in that way. So I would say that was what I recovered into. And then I actually let my eating disorder recovery story chill for a while. I didn't think about eating disorder recovery. I kind of forgot in my head, like, for a few years, I started working in public health as a community health educator. So I was talking to families about essentially safety, right? It was like a very cute community. It was a cute community job where I was always teaching and educating people on different elements of safety. And I loved that. And then one day I stumbled back into the idea of coaching. And when I was a coach, I started as a life coach. I don't know if you knew this. I started out coaching certifications, and I'm a go-getter. So I would create these events in New York City about life coaching. And I would open up these events starting with the power of my eating disorder recovery journey. So I would share that light bulb moment usually.
Yeah.
And I would talk about my eating disorder journey and how one thought can change your life. And after those events, although I had taught some really valuable tools and methods for coaching, everyone came up to me wanting to know more about eating disorder recovery. And that's when I decided to claim myself as an eating disorder recovery coach and lean into that, because it was really revealing how many people wanted to know more, how many people were struggling with this. If you have the boldness to say, hey, I went through this, so many people come out of the woodworks and say, me too, can you help? So the niche came very naturally, the flow into this journey developed from there. That I could go on, but that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
That's so wonderful. And part 2 with you is going to be about your wonderful recovery collective and all the experiences with that.
Yes. And then with that, I mean, and then the journey continued. I'm a huge lover of I'm a fan, lover of community and relationships and friendships. And if there's one thing that lights me up, is helping people connect, right? And become best friends with each other. I love seeing people like become friends. And so I created the Recovery Collective to give people in eating disorder recovery a place to go to feel seen and authentic around others that are recovering, and learning alongside of them about recovery and taking action. So we have this eating disorder recovery community that I am so proud of. And we all get together to learn and support each other through this journey. I do coaching inside of there. We have guest speakers in there, different events every week. And that's been really special. We also do retreats, so we get to see each other in person.
Yeah, I see the pictures and it looks so good.
Yes, it's been a really
wonderful,
great, amazing professional accomplishment in my life, in the sense that it's something bigger than me. Like, I've created something beyond just a private practice. It's bigger than that.
Wow. Recovering into love. We could record a whole episode about relationships and what relationship means before, during, and after recovery. So love that, because that was a key one in my journey too. Wow. What a conversation. We journeyed through lots of so important things to talk about. And thank you so much for sharing so openly your, the wisdom you gained on that path.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share everything with your community and your listeners today. I'm so grateful for this, and it has been truly fun to kind of walk down memory lane with you and share everything that I've picked up along the way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg, for being on the podcast and for this wonderful, heartwarming conversation I had with you. I can still feel all the joy and depth and inspiration I experience myself. And I hope for you, dear listener, that this was an inspiring conversation too. You can see in the show notes where and how you can find Meg and how you can connect with her. And you can find out how to connect with me. And yeah, what is left to say? Go well, take good care, trust your feet, heart, belly, and your whole body. Lots of love, and I'm so much looking forward to hearing from you. Bye bye.